Happy Friday, monsters. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the MurderMurder.news podcast. These weekly episodes also serve as weekly meetings for our very own true crime cult. But don't worry, you've landed in the cult with all the flower crowns and none of the flavor aid. If you don't know us yet because you're just finding us for the first time today, I'm Angelina and I'm hanging out with the real housewife of true crime, Aurora. How's your week going?
You know, it's going pretty great so far. We celebrated the 8th birthday of my very own demon, Sebastian. And it was really nice. We took him on like a 3-hour walk around Stanley Park with some friends on Sunday. And then we had
He had a beautiful cake.
Yes. He got a really cute cake from, I think it's called like the Great Canadian Dog Cake or something.
Aww.
From like a
cute.
place in Vancouver. And it was very cute. And the icing, like it's cute because like I've seen a lot of dog cakes before. And this is the first one I'd ever seen in photos with like a white icing looking like a buttercream. Mm-hmm. And I was like reading the ingredients because like I don't just want to get him something that is junky food or whatever. Like I'd like it to be real food. Like he eats a raw food diet and like whatever. So I'm like, okay, like what's in this? Like how is it so pretty? Mm-hmm. But they make it out of mashed potatoes.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this, we should also post a picture of this on our Patreon newsletter because like this actually looks like a cake. Like I had to look through all the pictures and see the last one where it was like zoomed in on the cake to be like, oh yeah, I'm certain this is a dog specific cake. Right. Because you can see the little dog bone. Because otherwise, like from far away, it looks like a cake I would eat.
Exactly. And like when
impressive.
I got it out, my husband was like, is this a cake we can eat too? Because it looks so delicious. And
you're like, go ahead and try a bite.
Like, I think it's probably real food, but I don't think it has like any salt or like sugar or anything that makes a human want to eat it.
Yeah, I don't think dogs have the same kind of taste buds. No. I don't think they need any of that.
So how was your weekend?
It was all right. It's been busy. Been doing band stuff with Louis, which was fun because there's still not a full regular amount of shows these days, and I go to even less of them. So that's cool. But I was super bummed that the Pride Parade in Montreal was canceled super last minute, which just is absurd. I think that should never happen. It's like a weird kind of like, it sounds like they have kind of a cop-out excuse as to why this occurred. And then there's sort of rumors going around as to why it might have really happened. And what it comes down to is people are saying it has to do with the cops because the cops were told not to wear uniforms to the Pride Parade, which of course is understandable if you know anything about like queer history. And then the cops then were, I guess, not down to volunteer to do security detail if they weren't allowed to wear their uniforms. And so it just became a big like, well, fuck you then. You're not getting your Pride Parade, which is like not how things should go because this is super important, again, historically. And just like, I mean, for a big, like, cosmopolitan city to be like, actually, forget it. We won't bother. It's so not acceptable. But
such a letdown. I'm so disappointed to hear that.
Yeah. So hopefully that never happens again. And I mean, if that's the way things are going to be, then I think to the chagrin of many Montrealers, I might just pack up and go to Toronto Pride next year.
Do it. I hear the Pride Parade's better anyway.
Well, now it freaking is. Like before, you might have had an argument, but like, right, exactly.
Amazing. Well, of course, we consider all of you listeners to be honorary monsters, but if you'd like to make it official, you can join the MMN commune at patreon.com/MurderMurder.news. There you can show your support for all we do by making a monthly pledge of whatever amount you like, whether you've got a few extra bucks or a few hundred. And to show how much we appreciate your support, we'll give you a shout out on the show, give you a title like Deacon or Grandmaster of Goats, and you'll have exclusive access to our regular patron-only content.
We're now posting mostly unedited video versions of our weekly podcast episodes for patrons only. So if you enjoy a good glimpse behind the scenes and can't get enough MMN, we've got you. We also post monthly video exclusives on Patreon in which we do a deep dive on a special interest case or an overlooked aspect of true crime, and we're always open to requests. So if there's something you'd like to learn more about, let us know.
Let's kick things off with a look at some of the true crime stories that made headlines this week.
Authorities in Albuquerque, New Mexico, are investigating the murder of Naeem Hussain, a 25-year-old Pakistani immigrant who was killed Friday evening. Police are connecting his murder to the murders of 3 other Muslim men in what Governor Grisham has called targeted attacks. Hussein's death comes just days after police established a connection between victims Aftab Hussain and Mohammed Hussain. On July 26th, Aftab Hussain was found with gunshot wounds on the 400 block of Rhode Island Street. On August 1st, Mohammed Afzal Hussain was shot and killed. He was found on a sidewalk next to Cornell Street and Lead Avenue. Both men were immigrants from Pakistan. The day Naeem was murdered, he attended a funeral for the most recent victims and expressed his own fears surrounding their murders. The local Crime Stoppers organization has offered $20,000 for any information leading to an arrest.
The alleged duck sauce killer in New York City reportedly completed suicide last Friday morning while out on bail. With a self-inflicted gunshot wound, his death comes hours before he was meant to appear in court on second-degree murder charges. 51-year-old Glenn Hirsch was accused of stalking, harassment, and eventual murder of Chiwen Yen, a 45-year-old delivery driver for the Great Wall restaurant. The feud between the men began last October when, unsatisfied with the amount of duck sauce he received with his order, Hirsch stormed to the restaurant and caused a scene with Yen and other workers. Hirsch's outburst rose to threats and even bringing a gun to the restaurant. Despite footage showing Hirsch driving around the Great Wall restaurant numerous times and following Yen on April 30th, the day of the murder, Hirsch pleaded not guilty to all charges and asserted the police had arrested the wrong person.
We'll be right back after a quick commercial break from one of our fellow Darkcast podcasts.
Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. I'm CJ, host of Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBT. My episodes focus on crimes committed by and against the LGBTQ community. I've covered cases you probably have heard of, such as Matthew Shepard, Brandon Tina, and the Orlando Pulse nightclub massacre, as well as some lesser-known cases like the murder of Ray Hainish, the Australian gay beat murders, and the suspicious disappearance of Lisa Lynn Stone. I cover cases brought to me by listeners like Penny Brummer, who I believe was wrongfully convicted, taboo cases such as lesbian corrective rape and murder in South Africa, and Pray the Gay Away camps. I discuss gay serial killers, women who pretend to be men to hook up with other women, and trans murders. I'm opinionated and uncensored. I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but surely I'm someone's shot at tequila. No matter what your gender or orientation in life might be, please join me as I tackle rainbow crimes in search of unicorn justice. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.
And we're back.
We're excited to announce that we'll be performing at the Pacific Northwest True Crime Fest in Seattle this October.
Join us on Sunday, October 9th at 10:45 a.m. for a special live podcast episode focusing on a moment from true crime history that took place in the Pacific Northwest.
Join us at the MurderMurder.news table all weekend long if you want to stock up on murder merch, get a chance to win some swag, or sip a cocktail or mocktail with us at Darkcast PNW Happy Hour, soon to be announced.
Before we dig in, we want to offer a quick disclaimer. Though we joke about forming a true crime cult, that is not to diminish the severity of actual cult activity, and we want you to know that we take the cases we're discussing very seriously.
We want to deliver each story with the utmost respect to victims and anyone involved. If you feel we've missed the mark, you don't like our tone, or if you notice we've gotten any details wrong, let us know with a quick email to murdermurdernews@gmail.com and we'll make it right.
Some specific trigger warnings for this episode include child murder, child sexual assault, child sexual abuse, racism, classism, and human trafficking. If any of those subjects are particularly sensitive for you, feel free to skip this one and listen to one of our other episodes instead.
25 years ago tomorrow, 12-year-old Georgia Leah Moses disappeared from Santa Rosa, California, only to be found murdered alongside a highway 9 days later. Georgia's short life was marked by failures of the system while she was alive, but also continued to fail her in death. From the moment her body was found, the coroner initially believed she was an adult, even though she was not any more developed than any other kids her age. This shaped the way the media presented her case, making statements like, quote, Georgia Leah Moses was only 12 years old, but she was growing up fast, maybe too fast. The victim blaming started right out of the gate, as it was suggested that this sweet, silly ball of light was a sex worker who, quote, slipped through the cracks. Firstly, 12-year-olds cannot consent to sex, and having sex with a child is always rape. And secondly, the concept of a kid slipping through the cracks displaces blame on the system that should have been protecting her. To make matters worse, Georgia Leah Moses wasn't even her legal name. She was born Georgia Leah Moses, and the police and media couldn't even get that small but significant detail right. That error caused an incorrect name to be listed on her headstone, where she's now buried. If you're like us, there's a good chance you've heard Georgia's story before, but there's also a good chance you haven't heard her real story. Georgia's case is still unsolved, and someone out there knows what happened. Our sources for today include They Called Her Georgia Leah, a wonderful podcast made by her sister and her close friend Maria, justiceforgeorgia.leahmoses.com, Voices for Justice, Dateline, The Fall Line, and more. For a full list of our sources, check out our show notes.
Georgia Leah Moses was born on January 7, 1985, in Buffalo, New York, to her mother, Ida, and her two older brothers, Mario and Jermaine. Her father was no longer around, and her two brothers really stepped in to help out with their precious little sister. Jermaine, the oldest, has recalled waiting outside of the delivery room, waiting for his little sister to be born, like a scared father. That's how close he felt to her from the beginning. He thought she was so beautiful and was a proud older brother. Ida taught Jermaine how to help take care of baby Georgia and do things like change her diapers and put A&D ointment on her if she had a rash. Just a few weeks after her birth, Buffalo was hit with the blizzard of '85, often referred to as the six-pack blizzard, after the mayor made a very let them eat cake statement, suggesting residents stay inside and grab a six-pack. The storm dropped 33 inches of snow on the town with 53-mile-an-hour winds. But little Georgia had needs, and Jermaine can remember facing that blizzard with a shovel to get out of the house, to run errands, to make sure she was cozy and taken care of. Even as a toddler, Georgia was Jermaine's shadow. She would watch him practice for his football and basketball games. She would get all bundled up in her coat, hat, and earmuffs and would hang out at practice. When she would get hungry, he would let his teammates know it was time to get her something to eat.
Once Jermaine wanted to go out, and his mom told him he either had to take his brother Mario with him or little Georgia. He said there was no question in picking Georgia because she was just so easy to hang out with. Wherever Jermaine went, Georgia was there too. She trusted her older brother to take care of her. When Georgia was 5, her little sister Angel was born. This was clearly a family that loved each other and took care of each other, and Georgia became Angel's protector, just like Jermaine had always done for her. Not only did Georgia help take care of her little sister, but she also stepped in to take care of her mom, who was dealing with mental health issues. Ida was diagnosed with bipolar schizoaffective disorder, which is essentially a combination of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and she struggled to take care of her kids. Angel remembers Georgia taking so much better care of her than a 12-year-old should have been able to. On her website, georgialeahmoses.com, she shared a few stories about her big sister. Quote, growing up, my family fell under the low-income category. Despite the things we lacked, I never had to worry. From a young age, my sister took on the burden of ensuring I was well cared for to the best of her ability. Georgia did my hair, fed me, looked after me. She taught me about life. She went on to say, in my mind, I had two moms, my actual mom and Georgia. We were like two peas in a pod. I didn't understand the burden Georgia took on due to my mother's mental state. I just knew I could always depend on her. Georgia was my protector, my teacher, my rock, my everything. I can vividly remember Georgia sitting me down and teaching me how to tie my shoes. At first, she tried teaching me the 2 bunny ears method. For some reason, I couldn't figure it out. After struggling for some time, she had me practice using one bunny ear and wrapping the shoelace around it. Almost immediately, I mastered it. I was 6 years old. Georgia was 11.
Another important memory for her was the time Georgia taught her how to swim, but more importantly, how Georgia taught her to believe in herself. Quote, "I remember her teaching me how to swim. She had such confidence in my ability to learn. I was scared and fearful of drowning, but Georgia believed in me. She yelled out to me to doggy paddle and demonstrated in the air how to do it. 'I can't,' I yelled. 'Yes, you can,' she yelled back. Her encouraging words helped me doggy paddle to her, and from that day on, I knew how to swim. I actually grew to love swimming and often reflect back to the day my sister taught me." And another memory about how much fun she had with Georgia, who friends always mention was so funny and silly. Quote, "When I was younger, one of my favorite things to do was go to the park. Georgia would do the best underdog. For those of you who have never heard of an underdog, it's when a person gets on a swing and another person pulls the swing back and then runs forward and goes under the swing. The swinger swings high, and the person that pushed the swing feels accomplished to not have gotten kicked."
I love that.
Yeah. Georgia would go back and forth, putting all of her might into her push. I always felt at any moment I could reach out and touch the sky. If you saw me at the park today, you more than likely would see me do underdogs with my daughters. Friends have described her as smart, funny, and silly, with a love of dancing and grilled cheese sandwiches. She dreamed of being a nurse someday. The family eventually moved to California in Santa Rosa, and Jermaine stayed behind in New York.
More than just being such a good friend and making Angel feel so adored, Georgia helped take care of things a 12-year-old shouldn't have had to take care of, like paying bills and cashing her mother's Social Security checks. When journalists mention that Georgia grew up too fast or she slipped through the cracks, it's important to remember that this should not have been the case for her. She deserved better, and she deserved to get to be a child and not to have to worry about things like keeping the lights on, being unhoused, or how her little sister was going to have food to eat. Georgia has been referred to as an old soul, which is really common for children who grew up in tough circumstances or grew up with abuse. They have to fulfill the role of an adult when they shouldn't have to. Many journalists have put the blame on adults that should have been protecting her, and we agree there should have been more adults paying attention, but that fault didn't rest with Ida. Ida was struggling with her own mental health, and she knew she needed help. She wasn't able to take care of herself, and she wasn't getting the support she needed, so she approached CPS several times, knowing she wasn't in a place to care for her children. She wanted her kids to have a chance for a better life and felt unequipped to provide that for them. Ultimately, Ida surrendered the kids to the state several times, but CPS would return the kids to Ida even when she was unhoused and really struggling. Georgia and Angel did live in group homes at times, and Angel has said she doesn't understand why CPS didn't place them in more reliable care permanently. Angel loves her mom, and they have a beautiful relationship today, but her mom was just not in a good enough space to raise them at the time. It's what Ida knew was best for her children, and Georgia's story would have gone so much differently had she ended up in a better home equipped to provide for her.
Georgia left school to take care of her mom and sister in the 6th grade. She pulled herself out of school, and we know that she talked to either the principal or vice principal about this choice, and he did nothing. No one stepped in. A 12-year-old girl dropped out of school because her mother was having a hard time caring for herself and her sister, and no one stepped in to interfere. Georgia has been billed as a girl who started getting into trouble, but that simply isn't true. She didn't leave school because she was struggling. She was a smart kid. She had absolutely no criminal record. There's nothing at all to back up this idea. At some point, Ida began dating a man, Eddie Pope, who had been convicted of sexual crimes against children. Ida wasn't aware of Eddie's past and didn't know how this would impact her family. Around the end of March or early April in 1997, Eddie was staying with Ida. One night, Georgia had just made herself some hot dogs and eggs for dinner and took them back to her room. Angel witnessed Eddie follow Georgia into her room, close the door behind him, and lock it. Moments later, she heard screaming and things being thrown. Eddie bust out of Georgia's room saying, quote, "If you're not going to follow my rules, then you can't stay here."
Angel went to comfort her sister, and there was mustard all over the wall from where she had thrown her hot dog in the struggle with Eddie. Angel tried to talk Georgia out of leaving their home, but Georgia said, "Well, I can't stay here." She ended up staying at the homes of a few family friends, and we use the term friends loosely. One of those homes was about 5 minutes away from where her family was staying with Eddie, and from a distance, Angel remembers things seeming friendly, and they believe this was the best move for Georgia. Ida suggested the whole family move in with her friends, but Georgia assured her everything would be okay. Once living with these friends, Georgia seemed to go through a big change. She started dressing differently, and she was no longer her regular, bubbly self. Her best friend remembered thinking she seemed sad, and when she would hang out with Georgia, she no longer wanted to do the usual types of things they'd always done as kids, and that kind of made her friend feel uncomfortable. Angel has said quite a few people lived in the house, a child about her age, a couple around Georgia's age, and some were 17 and older. There were some adults living there that Angel now believes were actually pimps. The older kids spent a lot of time hanging out with Georgia, which seems pretty strange for kids 17 and older that they would want to hang out with a 12-year-old.
Law enforcement has heard that the teens started taking Georgia to San Francisco to meet with older men. They believed Georgia was being trafficked and forced into having sex. Angel also has good reason to believe these rumors, though the people Georgia was staying with have always pretended to care about her and have never admitted to trafficking her. Everyone who was living in the house was expected to pay rent, whether that was through sex work or selling drugs. But keep in mind, many of the people living there were 17 years old and younger and could not have consented to sex, and therefore were being trafficked. We support sex work, but if someone is under the legal age of consent, it's not sex work, it's sex trafficking. Not long after Georgia moved out, the family was evicted from their home and moved in with Eddie Pope. Ida was in a tough spot. CPS was not helping her find safe homes for her daughters, and she believed having a secure location would ultimately be a positive because she couldn't register Angel in school without having a home address. After being convicted of sexual crimes against children, Eddie should not have been allowed to have a child in his home, but again, the system failed Georgia and Angel. To Angel's knowledge, Ida did not know Eddie was a pedophile and did not know he had attempted to rape Georgia. Angel was allowed to live with Eddie, where she ended up being sexually abused, and Georgia was living on her own, being trafficked. Had a parole officer checked on Eddie, it would have been clear that there were two issues to deal with.
Between the time Georgia left home and her murder in August, she still stopped to check on Angel all the time. They would have dinner together, go to the park to play, and Georgia was still an important part of Angel's life. On the day of August 13th, 1997, the last day Georgia was seen alive, the two sisters spent a very normal evening together. They went to either a gas station or Jack in the Box together, and then Georgia braided Angel's hair. Angel asked if she could have a pair of Georgia's cute boots, and Georgia said absolutely not. Georgia tucked Angel into bed for the last time and then left to meet up with a friend. She met up at her friend's house in Santa Rosa and at some point received a page. This was during the era before cell phones, so to get in contact with someone, you would have to send them a page, and they would have to get to a phone to either call you or page you back. She returned the page from her friend's landline, and around 10 p.m., they walked to a gas station near Sebastopol Road and Dutton Avenue, where she had been with Angel a little earlier, to meet up with someone to go to a party. Georgia was wearing a white shirt, a windbreaker, jeans, and had her hair in shoulder-length braids. As the two girls walked, Georgia talked about how all she wanted to do was take care of her family. Her friend said she tried to talk her out of meeting the strange man, but Georgia said she had to and invited her friend along, saying she would have fun. Georgia didn't want to go alone. Her friend didn't want to go because she knew she would get in trouble with her mom, but she has always regretted letting Georgia get into that car alone. An unknown man pulled up in a small 4-door white vehicle. Her friend didn't recognize him or know where they were heading to the party. Georgia said goodbye, but they had plans to hang out together later that night. Georgia did check back in by calling her friend at home on her landline a little later. She told her friend she wouldn't be able to meet up again, and that was the last time Georgia was seen or heard from alive.
Without any adult supervision or care, no one knew Georgia was missing. In fact, no one seemed to realize she was gone for 9 days. Her mom believes she was staying with friends, and if the friends she was staying with know anything about her murder, none of them have come forward to help her. None of them reported her missing. There's been a rumor that an anonymous tip about Georgia was called in 3 days after her disappearance, but that rumor has never been confirmed. One person did suspect something was amiss, and that person was Angel. It wasn't like Georgia to go this long without coming to check on her. On August 22nd, CPS arrived at Eddie Pope's home for a wellness check after hearing a pedophile had a child staying in his home. Police had actually received the tip in April, around the time he attempted to rape Georgia, but they did not actually do the wellness check until August. They asked Angel if he had ever touched her inappropriately or made her uncomfortable. Angel did answer their questions and had been being sexually abused by Eddie, but felt overwhelmed and confused about their questions. To her, the real issue was that Georgia was missing. She hadn't seen her sister since August 13th, and they never went this long without seeing each other. Angel told the officers her sister was missing, and they realized a second child should have been living there. That day, 7-year-old Angel filed a missing persons report for her sister. She was removed from her home by CPS and placed in a child's home she had stayed at several times before.
Coincidentally, the same day, a body was found 20 miles away from where Georgia was last seen. A Caltrans worker fixing a guardrail along Highway 101 on the southern end of Petaluma made a grisly discovery. He spotted a naked, badly decomposed body laying underneath a grove of trees. She was found along Highway 101 beside the Santa Rosa's Petaluma Boulevard on-ramp. Information given to the news by the coroner was that the body found was that of an African-American woman between the ages of 18 to 40. She was 5'4" and 120 pounds. We're not really sure how this mistake was made. Angel has said Georgia wasn't any more developed than most 12-year-olds, and in this environment, naked and a state of decomposition, it's not like she was wearing adult clothes or adult makeup. Nonetheless, this mistake would forever affect Georgia's story. It's like the media and spectators just couldn't get the idea of her being an adult or too grown up out of their heads, and it paved the way for 25 years of victim blaming. Victim blaming a 12-year-old. Based on a tip officials received and her missing persons report made by Angel, police believe the body found along Highway 101 might be Georgia. It's a little unclear how the identification was made. There have been reports that she was identified using dental records, and a so-called friend has said she did an identification of Georgia's body based on crime scene photos. That story didn't hold a lot of weight considering she was definitely not next of kin for Georgia, and considering the state of decomp. Angel now believes she was actually identified through fingerprints. The time of death for Georgia is unknown, though she was likely murdered on the 13th or 14th based on her level of decomposition. Georgia was raped and strangled. She was found lying face down under trees near the highway. She was likely murdered at another location and moved to 101 based on the high level of traffic in the area, but police have released varied information about her murder to the public or her family throughout the years.
Angel will never forget being given the news about her sister's murder as a 7-year-old who didn't really have an understanding of death to begin with. Angel was at the group home playing outside with a friend. She was brought to an office and told to sit down because they had important news for her. They told her they found her sister, and Angel asked where she was. They told her she was gone. Angel asked what that meant, and they told her she was dead. Angel literally didn't believe it and really thought it couldn't be true. They told her it was true, and Georgia was so badly decomposed, they had to identify her with dental records. A 7-year-old. They told this to a 7-year-old. This also didn't make sense to Angel because going to the dentist was not a thing for their family since they were low income. Reality settled in for Angel, and she asked to go to her room. One of the adults at the house walked her there, and he asked if there was anyone she wanted to be with. Angel asked for the friend she had been playing with outside, and he told her she couldn't come because she was too busy playing. He left her alone to process the death of her sister. The friend who was with Georgia when she left for the party was able to give a description of the unknown man she got into the car with. She described the man as 6'2" to 6'4", around 200 pounds, with a short fade haircut and a slight mustache. He was between the ages of 24 and 30. We'll include the sketch of her friend's description on our socials and website because there have been a couple of people of interest throughout the years, and tips have been reported about those people. It's possible he could still be recognized from that sketch.
Though Georgia was found on August 22nd, a description of her potential killer wasn't released to the public until September 16th, and a sketch of the suspect wasn't released until January of 1998. Think how much time was lost and potential witness memories during those months of inaction. The investigation has had very little progress throughout the years, and it's pretty easy to imagine why when you consider the lack of detail to her case from day one. Identifying her as the wrong age, printing her name incorrectly on her death certificate, and not staying in touch with her family, where they may have been helpful in providing information about her. Angel still isn't sure how the police and media started using the wrong middle name for Georgia, but part of the problem was they didn't talk to her mother about her case. Angel believes the misinformation could have come from her aunt, but she can't understand why they wouldn't have spoken to Ida about something as important as the correct identity of her daughter. We'll talk a bit more about Georgia's aunt a little later. From day one, her family was left out of the loop, and 25 years later, things haven't improved. Angel also believes investigators never followed up on the number Georgia paged the night she went missing from her friend's house, nor the number she called her friend from later in the evening. This feels like such a giant hole in the investigation and something that would have been so easy to look into at the time. I think that's really shocking to me. I'm just so angry about it.
Yeah, that's like, are you even doing anything if you're not looking into that? Because that's the first detail. You'd be like, well, okay, she called someone right before.
Right. And I feel like pagers were quite traceable.
Sure. I think they have a call record at least.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you can get like burner phones and such now, but I don't really know that existed with pagers. Like I think you had one pager because they were expensive, and like I doubt anybody would have had an untraceable pager at the time. Like what in the world?
No, I don't think so. That seems unlikely. And like calling a landline. Yeah. I mean, so very traceable.
Right. Very traceable.
Like traces the actual location that the call was made. So.
Right. So upsetting.
Yeah, awful. Someone in a cold case group has since stated they once found clothes abandoned at their business, which was in the area, that were small enough to belong to a 12-year-old girl. The clothes looked torn up and had been turned into the police. Nothing was ever done with the clothes, and it looks like they've been lost at this point. There was hardly any media coverage about Georgia's murder from the beginning, and as we've mentioned, what little coverage there was pretty problematic. From the victim blaming to the incorrect naming of Georgia, it was a mess. Using the wrong middle name for Georgia to tell her story may feel a little insignificant, but the deal is Georgia has now become known as Georgia Leah Moses. She's rarely just referred to as Georgia Moses, so her family has to see a name that doesn't belong to their sister and daughter time and time again. In fact, Tom Waits even wrote a song about her called Georgia Leah that was then covered by Phoebe Bridgers, both identifying her incorrectly. Just imagine how annoying it is to have people pronouncing your name wrong time and time again, and then imagine having someone misname your sister taken from you at the age of 12 by people intent on belittling and blaming her. That's wild. I never knew that was the story from the Tom Waits song. So yeah, that's interesting.
I hadn't heard it, but in like another little like tidbit here that Angel has mentioned is there's been like so many write-ups about that song. And that's like such an opportunity to then be like, this is about this murdered girl with an unsolved murder. Like, can you help?
Keep people talking about it.
The articles are just about Tom Waits. And then sometimes they'll start to write a story saying it's about Georgia's story, and they'll just talk about the song. And it's like we don't need more displacement here. Like there's already been enough of that. So it's such a disappointment to hear that. I feel like probably his intent, I was trying to find the story of the song, was to bring more interest to the case. And he probably had a good intent, and it's just been lost. Not long after Georgia's death, Angel was temporarily moved into foster care. It was around that time that her aunt, the one we mentioned earlier may have reported Georgia's name incorrectly, showed up. Her aunt wanted Angel to move to Atlanta to live with her. Angel hadn't been close to her aunt, and she wasn't sure if she should stay with her foster mom, whom she'd come to care for, or go with her aunt. She told her aunt she would go with her, but only if her mom could come too. Angel and Ida ended up moving to Atlanta, and her aunt eventually adopted her when she was 12. She found it too difficult to take care of Ida, so she moved her to New York for her sons to help get her on her feet, but it sounds like Ida wasn't doing as well as Angel had been led to believe. The move to Atlanta gave investigators an excuse not to stay in touch with Ida or the rest of the family about the investigation. In fact, no contact was ever made with anyone from Georgia's family again, and the case just sat cold.
The painful loss of her sister had been too much for Angel to process for years. She was in the military, got married, and now has beautiful daughters of her own. But in 2019, she felt a calling to do whatever she was able to do to help get justice for her sister. It started with the death of Leah Rowley, a woman who opened the Children's Village, a foster home for children in Santa Rosa, inspired by Georgia. Angel had been in touch with Leah for almost 10 years and really wanted to make it to California to visit the home in her sister's honor. But her past trauma just made it too difficult. Finding out she had missed the chance to meet Leah invigorated her drive for answers. She was ignited with a new faith that justice was coming for Georgia. For her, justice doesn't just mean finding out who murdered Georgia, but also to hold all of the systems that failed her accountable. Angel started getting in touch with the sheriff to push for answers. She told them she was not going anywhere and she would not stop contacting them until her case was solved. She found a community on Facebook that was also interested in seeking justice for Georgia, whether they be the Santa Rosa community or web sleuths. It was through this community that she met Maria, who went to school with Georgia, and her father had worked on the case many years earlier. The two became quick friends and worked on their podcast. They called her Georgia Lee together.
There have been some suspects suggested over the years, and there are quite a few serial killers that were active in the area during that time. That includes Wayne Adam Ford, a long-haul truck driver from Petaluma who murdered 3 sex workers between 1997 and 1998. Sam Little, America's most prolific serial killer, had victims in California in the late 90s. Ultimately, the evidence does point to the killer or killers as being someone who Georgia knew. Angel believes it could have been more than one person who knew her well. Many have pointed to Eddie Pope, but Angel has never believed it was him, and clearly he's not a good guy, but it appears he was cleared by the police.
Throughout the years, Georgia's murder has often been compared to Polly Klaas, who was also 12 and was also murdered in Petaluma. Polly's case got a ton of media coverage, and her case was solved pretty quickly, leading to a conviction. The difference in the two cases is often attributed to the fact that Georgia was Black and Polly was white. But Angel really doesn't like comparing the two because Polly deserved to have media coverage and deserved to have her case solved. She doesn't want to take away from that. But she thinks all missing and murdered children deserve that level of attention from police and the public. Angel has new hope in a cold case detective being assigned to Georgia's case recently. In the past, detectives working her case would have to put it on a back burner to address newer, more pressing cases. A detective assigned specifically to cold cases means more time to focus on getting answers. Someone does know who killed Georgia, and they've been living with the secret for far too long. It's time to bring closure to Georgia's family. It's time to honor her memory. It's time to come forward.
There are some things you can do to help. Angel is tirelessly working on getting the word out about Georgia Leah Moses' legacy, and you can help by sharing her story. We recommend checking out Angel's podcast, They Called Her Georgia Lee, her Facebook page, Justice for Georgia Leah Moses, her website, georgialeahmoses.com, and her GoFundMe. We will include all the links for those sites below so you can listen, subscribe, follow, and donate. In honor of her memory in the 25th year since her death, Angel has also launched the Show Love for Georgia Leah Moses campaign. The campaign encourages everyone to share Georgia's story on social media with hashtag #ShowLoveForGLM, to write a letter to the Sheriff's Department to say something positive about the case, and to help share other cases that might remind you of Georgia. Please do what you can to help bring justice to Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing that, like I say, being familiar with that song, I wasn't familiar with the case, which is exactly what you pointed out was the issue with that
Right.
situation. But it's like, wow. I definitely want to talk about that on TikTok one of these days.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I think that's like a great way to reframe it. Because I feel like, unless her family's just like, no, I hate that song, which I haven't heard from them. I think it's just that it's like been kind of a distraction.
I think just being like, hi, this exists. And did you know that it's about this case that like you probably didn't realize?
Exactly. Yeah. I think a TikTok about it would be fantastic. Like anything we can do, like any chance we have, for all of you to use either justice for Georgia Leah Moses or the new hashtag
Justice for GLM.
Any chance you have to, like tag her in something, whether it's something new about her case or this podcast episode or her sister's podcast, like it all helps. It all helps kind of clear up the story that's been mistold for so many years.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you mentioned that her sister is also interested in talking about other cases that remind you of Georgia's and stuff like that, that's really important too, because if we're trying to address systemic issues, then seeing a commonality, like, for example, another 12-year-old Black girl being, improperly identified in certain ways as either an adult or a sex worker or something like that. I'm sure that happens.
It's really too common. Like we see that working with the Black and Missing Foundation, like we just see way too much of that. We've mentioned recently there where police just categorize teenage women of color who go missing as runaways. And, I'm sure a lot of the time there's a trafficking situation or whatever. And it's like, well, she left. And it's like, if they're a child, they can't just leave legally. What are you saying?
Yes. And why doesn't anyone understand the concept of someone making it look like you left? Like, I don't understand why we wouldn't think that happens as often as someone voluntarily leaving, because like, I mean, you have to ask questions before you know. It's like, otherwise you're, not worth being a cop. What the fuck?
Right.
So you watching anything this week?
I did watch The Most Hated Man on the Internet after you suggested it last week. I think that's the only thing I watched.
Disturbing, huh?
It's really disturbing. I covered it on TikTok, y'all, if you have watched or haven't watched and are curious about it. But man, talk about like victim blaming.
Yeah, right?
Oh my gosh. Like just a real brief summary for anybody who hasn't watched. It's about like the first revenge porn site. And like when people started like speaking out against it because they were having their photos hacked and like posted against their consent, with no consent, against their will, people started saying like, you shouldn't have taken nudes.
You shouldn't take
like,
pictures.
You taking nudes?
As if
like,
every person in the world doesn't do that.
And like, it's like, you're allowed to take, like, it's like the Moira Rose quote, like, take 1,000 naked pictures now. Like, you'll appreciate it someday. Like, I encourage you to go take a naked picture right now.
But also, it's funny how it's like they demonize that so much, like as if that's a slutty thing to do and it's terrible to be slutty or something. But it's like, imagine I was taking a picture of my private parts being like, oh, do I have like a medical issue or I'm trying to check it out? And then someone stole those pictures. Like that would be the exact same fucking thing, because you're taking pictures that are not meant for anybody to see and you're just taking them for whatever your purpose is. It doesn't matter. But the fact that is they're your photos, it's your body. And if someone posts it, that's a crime. Well, should be a crime.
And the intent of the site was not to post sexy pictures. It was to embarrass people. It was like the more embarrassing, the more humiliating, the more secret the photo was. Like if you posted a picture of a rash on your labia, like they would love to post that.
They'd
like,
probably be like, haha, what a horror.
Like it was just...
exactly. Yeah, and I'm a little bit shocked that it happened as late as it did, because it sounds like something that, we think of attitudes sort of changing and some minimal progress being made socially. And like, I think back to obviously the 90s and the very early 2000s as like, wow, people were relentless and like just making fun of other people and just being awful. And that was the vibe. But this just continued so much later than that. That is like, what the fuck? Like, it could happen today, I guess, is the thing.
And like watching it, like I think all the time about how it seems like perhaps like we're getting more accepting and less problematic as a society. But then I feel like that's in like circles that want to educate themselves. And that's just not that's not happening on a large scale.
Yeah, no, it's our tiny bubbles. We see that because like our friends respect each other and like maybe like media outlets that we tune into on the regular, like aren't there to humiliate people, but like they still exist.
Absolutely.
They're still terrible humans.
So that was really interesting. But also then, is it The Sandman, the Neil Gaiman thing that's coming out? Have you started that yet?
I did start it. I did fall asleep, which was not the fault of the program. I just do that.
I do that a lot too.
But
I love falling asleep.
I need to revisit it.
I'm going to definitely watch that this week because I've heard such amazing things about it. So that's high up on my list. How about you? I
watched something that I have just been utterly fixated on ever since then. And it's like, it's so awful.
What is it?
So there is a documentary on Netflix called Trainwreck Woodstock 99. It's so definitely watch it, but like be prepared to be like horrified. Like it's so much worse than I ever could have imagined. It's like gotta be by far the worst music festival disaster in history, like far surpassing anything of Fire Festival. Like this is just like, that's not even worth mentioning compared to this. And I can't believe that we weren't mentioning it. Like this comes up now, but like immediately afterwards, I don't know, like for people that weren't there, even people that were there, it was kind of mixed messages that you're getting. Like I remember hearing a little bit of drama about it, but I think that the arrangers and promoters of the festival worked hard to snub out any bad news, any bad rumors, and just try and make it sound like it was fine, which reminded me of like, McDonald's taking legal action to make that lady who sued them for being burned by the coffee look ridiculous. Like these people were like, what do you, like, honestly, you're going to complain about like some punk kids were, bratty at a metal concert? It's just like, that's not really the situation. Like some of the most disturbing things are.
Tell me.
So they hired like teenagers and like just young skinny brats and whatever to do security detail, and not enough of them. So they just have people with like a yellow t-shirt on that are supposed to be pulling out crowd surfers and watching the crowd and stuff like that. And the crowd was like unprecedentedly huge. Like at times there was like 400,000 people there. And so these few teenagers are like, I don't know. And like half of them quit on the second day. And like, so there was like, obviously violence and stuff. There was also full on like sexual assaults happening in daylight in public. And there's nobody stopping this stuff because the security is so inferior and everyone's afraid to stand up for anything. So they're just sort of like, I don't know, crazy shit's happening. And it just like snowballed. And like by the third day, there's like a riot, which is warranted in some respects because this is a 3-day camping fest. People are showing up in their cars and they're ready to sleep there and stay there for 3 days. The people that are searching them as they come in are taking everything from them. Every bottle of water, everything. I went to a camping fest and they let us bring in alcohol. It was just don't bring drugs or weapons. But this is 3 days. They want you to buy everything from them.
Oh my gosh.
Including
Even
water.
Lets and you apparently bring water.
Right.
And that's
this is
like a capitalist
that's
nightmare.
Not acceptable. Yeah. So this is, imagine. So a lot of these people are like teenagers. This is an all ages event. And so these teenagers are there camping for the weekend and the water gets more expensive each day. And on day 3, it's $8 for a bottle of water in 1999.
Literally $8?
These kids are
not just for their times. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Really? So they're like, well, I guess we'll just not drink. And so then literally people are passing out. Yeah. So people are passing out with heat stroke and then they're overwhelming the medical tents because that's understaffed as well. Everything was deliberately understaffed to cut corners and make extra profits, which killed people and just left people scarred for life. And then so this riot that hit on the third day, I tried to go online and read accounts afterwards and be like, oh man, who was actually there that was saying some stuff? Because there were some people that were like, shit, I was there and it was the most horrific thing and I'm scarred for life and whatever. And then there were some people being like, what? I was there. I don't know. I heard there was a bonfire or some shit, but they really blew it out of proportion in the media. And then it's like, no, bud, like I saw camera footage of them setting 8 transport trucks on fire, and those transport trucks exploded because they had gas. Like, that's huge.
Wow.
So, like, the fact that, like, I didn't know any of this shit since this happened in 1999, and I had, like, friends that were listening to some of these bands. Like, I was in high school or whatever, so I obviously wasn't about to be there, but still, like, it's unbelievable that all of
That
this
is
disaster went down and they got away with it, I guess. Because like now, you know, you can talk about it on a documentary like 25 years later, but it's like, legally speaking, I don't think any litigation is about to go down. You know, it's like that's out of hand and in the past, the end.
Wow.
Just, yeah. It's a 3-part series, and I just put it on as soon as I saw it there and was like, I'm just going to see what this is. Next thing I knew, I was watching the entire series before I went to sleep. So that was something.
I will definitely look that up. That sounds horrifying.
Yeah, real scary. Well, I guess that's enough murder for one week. If you need even more murder, you can get your fill on MurderMurder.news, where we post the latest breaking true crime news articles every day of the week.
You can also find us on Instagram at MurderMurder.news, on Twitter at MurderNews, on TikTok at MurderMurder.news, and on Facebook, where you search for MurderMurder.news, you will see our page pop up.
And when you're on Facebook searching for Murder Murder News, you'll also see our group pop up, and you'll want to join us there to chat about all things true crime, but also to stay in the loop about our upcoming virtual events and our book club selections. Right now, we're reading The Murder Rule by Dervla McTiernan, and we'll meet on Zoom on Sunday, August 28th to discuss it.
Have you started it yet?
No, have you?
Ooh, yeah, I have.
Oh, yeah?
I like it.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, it's
Can't
good.
wait.
It kind of reminds me of oh shoot, I can't think of the name of that book. It was written like by a murderino and dedicated to murderinos. It was like the Sundance Inn, something at the Sundance Inn.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm talking about? We read it for a book club like ages ago. It kind of reminds me of like that sort of like style of storytelling where you're getting the like woman from the past, like her narrative through like a journal, and like there's like a mystery element.
That.
Like it's very interesting.
Those are some of my favorite tropes.
Yeah.
So into it.
Me too. I never knew that I was really into that style of storytelling, but here I am. Well, if you love our show, let us know by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Reviews really help keep us afloat, and they help new fans find our show, and they let us know which content you've been loving the most so we can keep creating more of what you like.
Thanks for listening. Have a great week.
Bye, friends.
Murder, murder.